The physiology of the endocrine system, the anterior pituitary gland. The anterior pituitary originates from the digestive tract in the embryo and migrates toward the brain during fetal development. There are three regions. The pars distalis is the most anterior. The pars intermedia is adjacent to the posterior pituitary, and the pars tuberalis is a slender tube that wraps the infundibulum. Recall that the posterior pituitary does not synthesize hormones, but merely stores them. In contrast, the anterior pituitary does manufacture hormones. However, the secretion of hormones from the anterior pituitary is regulated by two classes of hormones. These hormones, secreted by the hypothalamus, are the releasing hormones that stimulate the secretion of hormones from the anterior pituitary and the inhibiting hormones that inhibit secretion. Hypothalamic hormones are secreted by neurons but enter the anterior pituitary through blood vessels. Within the infundibulum is a bridge of capillaries that connects the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary. This network, called the hypophyseal portal system, allows hypothalamic hormones to be transported to the anterior pituitary without first entering the systemic circulation. The system originates from the superior hypophyseal artery, which branches off the carotid arteries and transports blood to the hypothalamus. The branches of the superior hypophyseal artery form the hypophyseal portal system. Hypothalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones travel through a primary capillary plexus to the portal veins, which carry them to the anterior pituitary. Hormones produced by the anterior pituitary in response to releasing hormones enter a secondary capillary plexus and from there drain into the circulation. The anterior pituitary produces 7 hormones. These are the growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, growth hormone, GH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, luteinizing hormone, or LH, the beta endorphin, and prolactin. Of the hormones of the anterior pituitary, TSH, ACTH, FSH, and LH are collectively referred to as tropic hormones. Trope meaning turning, because they turn on or off the function of other endocrine glands. Growth hormone. The endocrine system regulates the growth of the human body, protein synthesis, and cellular replication. A major hormone involved in this process is growth hormone, GH, also called somatotropin, a protein hormone produced and secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. Its primary function is anabolic. It promotes protein synthesis and tissue building through direct and indirect mechanisms. Growth hormone levels are controlled by the release of GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, and GHIH, also known as somatostatin, from the hypothalamus. A glucose-sparing effect occurs when growth hormone stimulates lipolysis, or the breakdown of adipose tissue, releasing fatty acids into the blood. As a result, many tissues switch from glucose to fatty acids as their main energy source, which means that less glucose is taken up from the bloodstream. Growth hormone also initiates the diabetogenic effect, in which growth hormone stimulates the liver to break down glycogen to glucose, which is then deposited into the blood. The name diabetogenic is derived from the similarity in elevated blood glucose levels observed between individuals with untreated diabetes mellitus and individuals experiencing growth hormone excess. Blood glucose levels rise as the result of a combination of glucose-sparing and diabetogenic effects. Growth hormone indirectly mediates growth and protein synthesis by triggering the liver and other tissues to produce a group of proteins called insulin-like growth factors, or IGFs. These proteins enhance cellular proliferation and inhibit apoptosis, or programmed cell death. IGFs stimulate cells to increase their uptake of amino acids from the blood for protein synthesis. Skeletal muscle and cartilage cells are particularly sensitive to stimulation from IGFs. Dysfunction of the endocrine system's control of growth can result in several disorders. For example, gigantism is a disorder in children that is caused by the secretion of abnormally large amounts of growth hormone, resulting in excessive growth. A similar condition in adults is acromegaly, a disorder that results in the growth of bones in the face, hands, and feet in response to excessive levels of growth hormone in individuals who have stopped growing. Abnormally low levels of growth hormone in children can cause growth impairment, a disorder called pituitary dwarfism, also known as growth hormone deficiency. The posterior pituitary gland. The posterior pituitary is actually an extension of the neurons of the nuclei of the hypothalamus. The cell bodies of these regions rest in the hypothalamus, but their axons descend as the hypothalamic hypophyseal tract within the infundibulum and end in axon terminals that comprise the posterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary gland does not produce hormones, but rather stores and secretes hormones produced by the hypothalamus. The paraventricular nuclei produce the hormone oxytocin, whereas the supraoptic nuclei produce ADH. These hormones travel along the axons into stored sites in the axon terminals of the posterior pituitary. In response to signals from the same hypothalamic neurons, the hormones are released from the axon terminals into the bloodstream. Oxytocin. When fetal development is complete, the peptide-derived hormone oxytocin, or childbirth, stimulates uterine contractions and dilation of the cervix. Throughout most of pregnancy, oxytocin hormone receptors are not expressed at high levels in the uterus. Toward the end of pregnancy, the synthesis of oxytocin receptors in the uterus increases, and the smooth muscle cells of the uterus become more sensitive to its effects. Oxytocin is continuously released throughout childbirth through a positive feedback mechanism. As noted earlier, oxytocin prompts uterine contractions that push the fetal head towards the cervix. In response, cervical stretching stimulates additional oxytocin to be synthesized by the hypothalamus and released from the pituitary. This increases the intensity and effectiveness of uterine contractions and prompts additional dilation of the cervix. The feedback loop continues until birth. Oxytocin is not only used during childbirth, but also breastfeeding. Although the mother's high blood levels of oxytocin begin to decrease immediately following birth, oxytocin continues to play a role in maternal and newborn health. First, oxytocin is necessary for the milk ejection reflex, commonly referred to as letdown, in breastfeeding women. As the newborn begins suckling, sensory receptors in the nipples transmit signals to the hypothalamus. In response, oxytocin is secreted and released into the bloodstream. Within seconds, cells in the mother's milk ducts contract, ejecting milk into the infant's mouth. Secondly, in both males and females, oxytocin is thought to contribute to parent-newborn bonding, known as attachment. Oxytocin is also thought to be involved in response to feelings of love and closeness, as well as in the sexual response.